Catharsis is a word with ancient Greek roots that has been highly influential in dramaturgy, psychology, philosophy, sociology, and many other walks of life. In this episode, we at the Anti-Library podcast will explore the meaning and history of the word, from the Greek epics via Aristotle to German aesthetic theory in the 18th century, and analyze it in relation to the visual arts, music, and movies, with some zest of theory and the flavors of Indian cinema, including a strong pinch of Bollywood. There will be a second episode on the idea of catharsis in psychoanalysis, sociology, and post-colonial thought. The Greek catharsis, with a K, comes from the root verb kathairein, and it means a number of physical processes of cleansing, such as washing of wounds, pruning of trees, clearing the fields of weeds, and purifying metals, such as gold from alloys, etc. The Greek words kathairein and katharos carried older ritualistic associations that we find in Homer, for instance, and some pictorial depictions in Greek vases from around the 8th century BC. It is a ritual process of cleansing blood guilt, where the blood of a sacrificed piglet is allowed to pour over the blood-polluted man, and running water washes away the blood. The lost Greek epic Aethiopis narrates the purification of Achilles after his murder of Thersites. Similar rituals are used in ritualistic cures of madness, especially caused by acts of transgression.
Aristotle's Poetics itself refers to the ritual cleansing of the pollution that Orestes had incurred by killing his own mother. And I quote, "Like the fit of madness in Orestes which led to his arrest and the salvation through the catharsis." Unquote. So the ritual sense of catharsis is not completely untethered in its use as an aesthetic category by Aristotle in the 4th century BCE. The last play of the Orestes, the trilogy written by Aeschylus, called the Eumenides, is key to understanding the overlap between the ritualistic and the Aristotelian senses of catharsis. Here, Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, is tormented by the Furies for murdering his mother. Orestes is helped by the gods, Apollo and Hermes, to escape to Athens, where the goddess Athena sets up a court of justice for him. This is a key moment when the violent law of the older gods, based on vengeance, gets replaced by a more humane notion of justice, and the Furies become the Graces, or the Eumenides. The original audience of Aeschylus probably knew the older meaning of catharsis as ritual atonement, even as they felt pity for the plight of Orestes as a human being, as suggested by the role of the chorus in the play, and the experienced fear at the acts of divine entities in the play, emotions that Aristotle would define a century later as central to tragedy. The Kannada film Kantara perfectly captures the tension between ritualistic sense of catharsis as a form of divinely ordained atonement and the Aristotelian sense of catharsis as purgation and purification of pity and fear. The film draws upon the world of Bhutakola, a shamanistic southern Indian ritual dance performance prevalent among the Hindus of southern Karnataka and northern Kerala, India. The dance is highly stylized and performed as part of Bhut Aradhana, or the worship of the local deities. The Bhutakola rituals have historically influenced Yakshagana folk theatre and the Theyyam of North Malabar region. The film Kantara enacts the tension between the human law and the divine law as the zamindars and the state forest department encroach upon tribal land and invoke the wrath of two deities, Panjuli and Gulia, associated with the Bhutakala dance. In a crucial scene towards the end of the film, the protagonist Shiva, a village idler, gets possessed by the deity to counter the violence of the local goons and the police, enshrining the divine protection of indigenous rights over the forest.
Catharsis acquired strong medical connotations by the time we come to Aristotle in the 4th century BCE, as the classicist Edith Hall tells us. In this period, it indicates partial removal of bodily fluids, especially women's menstrual discharges, a sense in which Aristotle, who is also a great biologist, uses the term frequently in his scientific treatises. Similarly, a cathartic is a substance that helps in bowel movement. But Aristotle's time is also when catharsis started taking upon itself a more philosophical sense. The philosopher Epicurus, who is the founder of Epicureanism and a younger contemporary of Aristotle, calls the intellectual capacity of distillation of arguments a form of catharsis. This is the intellectual milieu in which Aristotle uses the word catharsis in his definition of tragedy in chapter 6 of Poetics as a form of purgation or purification of the tragic emotions of pity and fear. It is hard to do a sociological analysis on the Aristotelian catharsis. He does not specify in what physical and social context it takes place. It is not clear whether he is thinking about a collective process in which the spectators participate or an individual process taking place in the psyche of the reader. After all, he was writing at a time when many people started reading dramatic literature as well. Some scholars, such as Leon Golden and S. Halliwell, have argued against the emotional interpretation of catharsis as a process of purging or purifying. Rather, they interpret it as a cognitive process of intellectual clarification about the events of the tragedy. The clarification thesis of catharsis is fully consistent with Aristotle's argument in chapter 4 of the Poetics that the essential pleasures of mimesis is the intellectual pleasure of learning and inference. So in this sense, catharsis is an intellectual process through which we learn.
Perhaps Aristotle considered Sophocles' Oedipus Rex as the perfect tragedy because of the importance it puts on knowledge. Oedipus becomes the king of Thebes by solving the riddle of the Sphinx, the legendary beast with the head and breasts of a woman, the body of a lioness, and the wings of an eagle. Little does Oedipus know that he has unknowingly killed his father Laius and married his own mother Jocasta while trying to escape from his fate. Scholars have debated whether he exemplifies the ultimate power of fate on human life or shows hamartia, or tragic flaw, in his action. But as Oedipus blinds himself on stage after learning about his patricide and incest, and the chorus repeats the Greek maxim that no man should be considered fortunate until he is dead, one feels the emotional discharge of catharsis as well as the burden of knowledge, which perfectly captures the Aristotelian catharsis. Catharsis, which is not a sociological category in Aristotle, becomes a social virtue in the hands of Neoplatonists, who put a huge premium on the idea of eros or love. The key figures here were Plotinus and Porphyry, and they were writing in the 3rd century BCE. For them, eros or love is a great transformational force that drives individuals towards the good and ultimately the one, the ultimate source of all reality. Eros is not merely a personal emotion here, but a force for social good. I think SRK has been the Neoplatonist of Bollywood, who has taught us that love can heal anything, from intergenerational trauma to social conflicts, at least on the silver screen. Plotinus uses catharsis as a process of purification of civic and political virtues that manifests order and beauty in society and works for the social good. It appears that being love-struck, playing mandolin in the mustard field, or violin in a conservative college does as much social good as movies with social messages like building toilets or forcing your kids to be wrestlers.
But remember, toilet is also a prem katha. It could be interpreted as deeply Neoplatonist. In Aristotle's own philosophy, we do not get a clear social function of catharsis, as we have already discussed. Rather, the term catharsis, most commonly translated as purgation or purification, works in multiple contexts such as religion, medicine, botany, and philosophy, which has led to scholarly debates regarding what Aristotle means by catharsis. The key sentence about catharsis in Poetics is, and I quote, "Tragedy through pity and fear effects the purgation of such emotions," unquote. So, in a sense, the tragedy, through the arousal of powerful feelings, has a soothing effect on the spectator. After the storm of the climax comes a sense of release from tension, of calm. Although the song Dekhi Zamane Ki Yari, regarded as one of the finest poems of Kaifi Azmi, comes at the beginning of Guru Dutt's 1959 film Kagaz Ke Phool, it reminds me of the Aristotelian catharsis, which happens at the end of the tragedy. The face of a frail old man, Suresh Sinha, once a famous director, faces the camera, and droops down from the railings. The final scene of the film, if you remember, where he recalls his glorious past, dies in the director's chair in an empty film studio, a lonely and forgotten man. That loops with the opening. These shots, wrapped in Muhammad Rafi's melancholic tune, embody pity and fear, born out of the betrayals of art and life, and capture the essence of tragedy.
Rafi Sahab's Dekhi Zamane Ki Yari is a perfect example for underlining the musical dimension of catharsis, which Aristotle mentions not in poetics but in politics. Politics mentions catharsis as one of the benefits of music, along with education and the pursuit of civilized virtues, which are possible only after the relaxation and release, catharsis, caused by music. Gurudat, especially in the song, carries the tragic demeanor remarkably well, but the character Suresh Singha does not have as many shades of grey. He is a largely upright person betrayed by everyone close to him, including cinema itself. I wonder if Aristotle would have approved of him as the tragic hero. The duality of pity and fear, the emotions that differentiate a tragedy from a comedy, is mapped into the characteristics of the tragic hero, who is neither completely good nor completely bad. When I think of fear as a tragic emotion, I recall the truly blood-curdling action of Medea in Euripides' play, who kills her own children and serves them to her unfaithful husband Jason, who previously used her magical gifts to rise in life, only to betray her. This gorgeous poster of the performance of Medea at the Théâtre de la Renaissance in Paris, designed by the Czech painter Alphonse Mucha, captures the moral ambiguity of Medea's action that elicit both pity and fear. Medea herself seems to suffer from fear as she pursues her revenge in this 1868 painting Medea by the pre-Raphaelite painter Frederick Sandys. Medea was probably modeled on Kiomi Gray, a Romani woman whom Sandys had met. Here we see the sorceress Medea in the act of incantation, the flickering lights of the tripod playing in the folds of her robe and making her cheek look pale and the ashy lips more ashy. Foul ingredients are upon the table, including a toad, a shell filled with blood, and her fingers are clutching on a beaded red necklace, indicating her sinister intent, perhaps tinged with a sense of remorse. For me, the fierceness of Medea the sorceress is best captured by Maria Callas in the Italian-directed Pasolini's 1969 film Medea.
Pity has perhaps been even more influential than fear as the embodiment of the tragic catharsis in the West, especially through the Christian notion of Pieta, translated as pity as well as compassion. The Pieta is one of the three common artistic representations of a sorrowful Virgin Mary. The Pieta, as a devotional art form developed in Germany, where it is called Vesperbild, about the 1300s, reached Italy about 1400s, and was especially popular in Central Europe as an aid of prayer and contemplation. The most famous sculpture of Pieta is of course the Carrara marble sculpture by the great Michelangelo, located at the St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City.
Often taken as one of the greatest works of the Renaissance, Michelangelo's Pieta captures the moment when Jesus, taken down from the cross, is given to his mother Mary. Mary looks younger than Jesus here. Art historians believe Michelangelo was inspired by a passage in Dante's Divine Comedy that goes, I quote, "O Virgin Mother, daughter of your Son, your merit so ennobled human nature that its divine creator did not hesitate to become its creature." A great moment of mourning, of pity carved in stone, the sculpture would come to be regarded as a great example of the perfectionism of art itself. The Renaissance art historian Giorgio Vasari said the following regarding Pieta, and I quote, "Never think a rare sculptor or craftsman to be able to add design or grace, nor with difficulty never being able to finesse, cleanliness, and to pierce the marble as much with art as Michelangelo did there, because you can see in it all the value and power of art." Unquote.
It makes sense that in German aesthetic theory in the 18th century, the emotional contours of catharsis, especially pity, will become very important. The philosopher G. E. Lessing argued that catharsis transmutes the passions aroused in the spectator into moral virtues. Tragedy helps people avoid the extremes of pity and fear and bring them back to the moral middle ground. Lessing also thought that pity and fear are closely allied emotions, and actually, fear is a manifestation of pity for ourselves or self pity. This understanding of the proximity among pity, fear, and self pity immediately reminds me of the song Kabhi Khud Pe Kabhi Halat Pe, penned by Sahir Ludhianvi and sung by Mohammad Rafi, picturized on Devanand in the movie Hum Dono. In this song and the movie, Devanand plays both the role of Major Burma with a mustache and of Anand without it. The song comes at the moment when these two men bond over their shared sense of separation from their loved ones at the war theatre of British Burma during the Second World War. And the song forebodes the personal and collective tragedies that would unfold in the movie. The song connects personal tragedy with the halat or the social condition of warfare that reinforces a sense of righteous self-pity. As the song says, सबको अपनी ही किसी बात पे रोना आया.
The German poet Goethe was strongly opposed to the moral interpretation of catharsis. He interprets catharsis as a reconciliatory conclusion or balancing of emotions that one attains after going through pity and fear. His major example is Oedipus at Colonus. Oedipus, after suffering from the terrible knowledge that he has unknowingly killed his father and married his mother in Oedipus Rex and blinding himself, attains a kind of noble calm here and becomes the guardian spirit of the land. In this painting of Oedipus at Colonus by the French academic painter Paul-Jean Harriet, notice the sense of calm as a beam of light rests on Oedipus's seat. A simple seat of stone where the old man might find some peace far from the vagaries of the royal court, as his hand clasped on his heart indicates, while the other hand soothes his daughter. Goethe sought the formal purity of art in the art of catharsis. On epic and dramatic poetry, written by Goethe and his interlocutor Friedrich Schiller, as well as their correspondents, are the main texts in which these views are postulated. Schiller perceived catharsis as a process of detachment from the passions. The performed suffering on the stage actually reveals mankind's resistance to suffering in life. Again, pity is the central tragic emotion in German Romanticism of both Goethe and Schiller. The song that reminds me of this dialogue between Goethe and Schiller on catharsis is the song Pucho na kaise maine rain bitai, composed by S.D. Burman, sung by Manna Dey and penned by Shailendra. This song is perfectly posited between the pain of life as Ashok Kumar plays the role of a gifted musician abandoned by his own family due to his dark skin, born out of the trenchant colorism of Indian society and the ability of music, of art to transmute pain into beauty.
Catharsis remains such an important idea for understanding human emotions in so many schools of philosophy and aesthetics. We will return with the second part of our take on catharsis, where we will discuss figures like Freud, Fanon, Bertolt Brecht, and Emile Durkheim. And we will, as we promised, get into Meena Kumari, Uttam Kumar, Amitabh Bachchan. Stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe to the Anti-Library podcast.